I'm Kate Murphy and welcome to The Craft of Writing for HSC Advanced English. Here are just a few ideas based on one of the prescribed texts, one of the many prescribed texts that we have a number of ideas about in the new resource. And the prescribed text that I've taken these teaching ideas from is called Love and Honour and Pity and Pride and Compassion and Sacrifice by Nam Le. Firstly, I'd like to talk a little bit just about a crafting approach, because at the essence of crafting is not analysis as it is in the other modules. At the very essence of crafting, as we teach it in Module C, is experimentation, finding interesting examples of crafting and using the master craftsman or craftswoman, craftsperson, craftswriter as inspiration for our own writing. And so in the activities I'm about to outline, you will see particular examples of interesting experimentation from the writer and then ideas about how students could use this within their own writing. So, the first example from the short story is the idea of imagery, and there's plenty of it there. It adds to a sense of poignancy and mood. In this particular example, it's imagery created by the weather, containing auditory imagery through the use of a simile. Rain fell on the streets, on the roofs, on the tin shed across the parking lot, like the distant detonations of firecrackers. And what a sentence that is. We have that lovely echoing anaphora on the, and it's a perfect example for students to use as a model for their own writing, as the inspiration for the creation of their own similes using auditory imagery. It's also really good for looking at how can the reader enter into the immediacy of a sensory experience through writing. And that particular prescribed text contained a number of these examples. They're always good to pick out in class and think about what makes this vivid, what makes this really interesting. And of course, Nam Le also uses colours in this very evocative way. The metallic blue of the air, the ground was white, the tin shed was white, snow had fallen, water black and braided. So these examples provide good ideas for thinking about how can we use in our own writing, not just imaginatively, but in a number of forms, colours. What's the symbolism of colours? Why do we refer to colours based on the association that those colours have for us? My last example, juxtaposition. And this is something that happens within the story when the author creates a scene through looking at two images beside each other, and we, the reader, are somehow required to connect these and to think about them in relation to each other. And it's a really clever technique. And in this particular example, Le is also using an allusion to one of the other prescribed texts, Wallace Stevens' image in the poem 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. And so he says, in the sky, two swarms of swallows converged, pulled apart, interwove again like veils drifting across currents. In line at a supermarket, a black woman leaned forward and kissed the handle of her shopping cart. Her skin dark and glossy like the polished wood of a piano. So, in looking at this in class, what do we do with the use of these two similes? What do we do with these images juxtaposed with each other, both the literal image of the swallows and the in line at the supermarket, and the imagery of veils drifting, the figurative language, the polished wood of a piano. Students can also experiment with the use of similes and with juxtaposing these images and thinking about how is it that a vision of two different parts in a scene can create such a powerful sense of mood. Now, these three examples are all examples of individual things happening from within the prescribed text. The resource also contains some good ideas for more broad, holistic tasks that students may use to respond to the entirety of the text. And so here we have, in responding to the story, students can write about memories, a really big element of this particular prescribed text. You're changing aspects of them to make the memory more vivid and interesting, moving from the memory to a more reflective voice, combining the aspects of different forms, reflecting on the decisions made as a writer when exploring the memory. And so this is the way in which students to consider combining an imaginative and reflective narrative voice. And how does that make the writing so very interesting? And you would know as teachers of Module C, many of the prescribed texts can contain or combine different forms in order to build a really complex and interesting relationship with the reader. Something stemming from some of the ideas in the story. Remembering that the literary representation and experimentation with particular techniques to explore ideas is important. Less so important are the thematic concerns, but within this particular prescribed text, there's the idea of an ethnic story, placed in capitals, the pressure the writer feels to write about his life. The thing is not to write what no one else could have written, but to write what only you could have written. A powerful sentiment and very reflective about the reader-writer relationship, like so much of Module C. So students can compose reflective, discursive or persuasive writing, considering the insights from the story and the very real value of writing about our own culture and experiences. Now, the ETA has 3 different resources available. We have workbooks for standard English and for advanced English that are available online at the website, and also a general craft of writing resource that encompasses both advanced and standard English. So I do encourage you to look at these and to think about some of the many different ideas they have for your classroom practice. They're written by teachers, and this is what makes them very engaging and very practical. Thanks very much. I hope you've enjoyed just a brief glimpse of one text and how to teach it within the craft of writing.